Harimi, harimi, al tirai, harimi, al tirai. Imri le'arei Yehuda, hine Elokeichem. Harimi, harimi, al tirai.
Page 188, the middle of Siman Pei. We've been talking about last time. There you go. This is a book, bilingual book. Here's all Hebrew one, 188 in the bilingual. We've been talking about thus far the body and the soul. Human beings are composed of two parts, of a body and of a soul. And the body is a reflection of Hashem's Hester Panim, of Hashem's Midah of hiding Himself. And therefore the body has different parts. It's in the middle of Pei in the Hebrew one. And the soul is a reflection of Hashem's Midah of Shleimus, of perfection, of God acting upon the world to perfect it all, which doesn't have separate parts. Now, the Ramchal is going to continue and discuss now how the soul is a reflection and how it has to do with other aspects of Hashem's perfection. V'amna. This idea is explained very well in the Medrash of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Zelashayna. The Islaminda, the iu is kari chacham b'chol mini chachmas. Now, what we're going to discuss now is certain aspects of God. Right? God is an infinite being that created everything, matter, time, space, us. How much of God can we really understand? So the answer is, when it comes to God's essence, His actual being, we can't understand anything about Hashem. Really, nothing. We talked about how we can understand that He's one, but we can't really understand much about Hashem. But what can we understand? We can understand how Hashem relates to the world, how He relates to us, and that's what the Ramchal is going to discuss now. And then he's going to take that and relate it to the neshama. The Islaminda, you should know, the iu is kari chacham b'chol mini chachmas. Hashem is called wise in every type of wisdom. Besides the way that this Medrash, which is really a Zohar, was explained by the Kabbalists, from the simple reading of this mimer, of this statement, we're going to learn, it's really saying what we explained already. God has many names, right? You look in the Siddur, God has many, many names. We call him many different things. But these names don't describe God's essence. You can't call God a specific individual name. Rather, you can only call Him things according to His creations. These attributes that He has that we mentioned. We don't call Him anything according to Himself, meaning His essence, but rather we only call Him names in relation to His creations. That's what we said. Al Shem Biryan Dehavo Asidin Li Baros. He's called based on the creation that He will create. So anytime we refer to Hashem with a name, we're not describing His essence. We're describing how He relates to us, how He relates to His creations. Va'amnan Amr. Now, when we just said Al Shem Biryam, that we describe Hashem based on His creation, who pashit? It's obvious. Kiloi nemar shehu davar shenischadish bo. We don't mean to say that this is something that was created, a new thing that came about in God Himself, right? We say there was a point when there were no creations, there was just God. So we're not saying that when God created the world and created beings that He had these new attributes. Chas v'shalom. We don't say that because nothing changes with Hashem. Right? Chas v'shalom. Ki ein chidush v'shinei bo, because there's nothing new and there's nothing that changes in God. Elagam mitchila hay b'kochu la'aso zeh. We were saying that also from the beginning Hashem had the power, the potential to do this. Aval ela hamidos tamid einam ela ma sheshayach l'briyusa. But these attributes are only things that are shayach, relate to His creations. Lo ma sheshayach l'fi atzmo, but not what is shayach, not what is related to Him Himself. So again, anytime we describe God or we call Him a name, we're not describing His essence, because that's something that we cannot understand. It's just impossible for a human being to comprehend God's essence. Not only a human being, a creation. It's impossible to comprehend God's essence. So when we call Him a name, we are describing the ways that He interacts with the world, which is how He chose to interact with the world. And the fact that there was a period of time, whatever time means, before God created the world, doesn't mean that there wasn't the potential for him to act like that with creations, meaning we're saying that there is nothing that changed in God when he created the world. That's what we're saying. There is nothing, because there is no such thing as change within Hashem. Okay? Clear? So good. So far, so good? A little esoteric?
Getting there.
Getting there? We're saying that...
Not getting there.
Oh, go over again. He's going to keep on describing it, but we're saying that there's a being called God, right? He's going to give an example. For example, we say God's merciful, right? We call God merciful. So the Ramchal is going to say that when you call a human being merciful, you're describing that human being, right? If I say Rabbi Braun is merciful, that means Rabbi Braun, his essence is mercy. I'm describing his essence, his being as merciful, because in his neshama, in his essence, he's a merciful being. But when we don't say that about God. When we say God is merciful, we're not describing the essence of Hashem, because we have no concept of the essence of Hashem. We'd be limiting Hashem. When we say God is merciful, we're only saying that the way he relates to his creations with mercy. We're not describing his essence, because that would be, first of all, be limiting Hashem in a certain way, and also we have no comprehension of God's essence. So when we say that God is merciful, we say that he chose to deal with the world with mercy. Or when we say Hashem is angry, we don't mean his essence is angry. We mean he's dealing with the world with anger.
And the reason why we do that is because we have not an image of God. We think in God is sort of like an image of a man, and that's why we relate to him.
Well, we definitely shouldn't relate to him as a man, but we do. That is a problem, and I think especially, I mean, I shouldn't say especially Western culture, but as human beings, it's very hard for us to grasp certain concepts, and that's why you have idolaters that they did that. They made images of God, which one of the fundamentals of faith in Judaism is that God does not have an image. So, for example, when we're praying, we have to imagine that we're praying to somebody. In our minds, we make that we're praying to somebody, but we don't think that of an image that we're praying to, right? We're praying to Hashem. So it's very hard for us to grasp these concepts, but you can with when you get used to it. But it's definitely don't have in mind that you're praying to a person, because that'd be very problematic. But it's definitely hard, people.
It's definitely part of the same thing that you just described, because if you attribute a image to Hashem, that means you're limiting it to what it's not.
Yeah, you're limiting Hashem. And it's also hard for us, grew up with all these movies where they portray God as a old man with a white beard. Right. So we from the time that we're children, we're trained to think like that, which is totally incorrect.
Yeah, when a person thinks of God as merciful, you kind of assign that to some kind of image, some kind of...
Right, so that's what he's telling us not to do that.
Yeah.
Right, it's hard.
You can't assign it to an image, and you can't assign the attribute. We have no comprehension. What you're saying is that Hashem does not have an image, he doesn't have a form, and also we have no understanding of who he is. We just see how he relates to us.
Right. We never describe God's essence. That's something. We never describe his essence. We only describe how he relates to the physical world, how he relates to us. But that's not the same when you're talking about a friend. You say a friend's angry, you're describing your friend as angry. You're not describing only how he relates to you. You could say, he's going to explain this. You're only describing how your friend is, you're describing his essence, that he's angry. So when we say Hashem is kind, we're not describing his essence as kind. We're describing he's relating to the world with kindness because he chose to relate to the world in that way. Right? So it's a new concept. It can be difficult, but he's going to explain. And what's interesting is that the same way that we can't describe the essence of God, he's going to say we also can't describe the essence of our neshama, which is kind of wild, because he's going to say we don't have the ability. We're in a physical world. We can't describe it properly. What a soul is really. We know certain things that the soul does, and it connects to Hashem. but we don't have the ability to truly understand what it is. And I think this is like the thing I mentioned before. Describe to someone who was blind from birth the difference between red and blue. He doesn't have the ability. You can't say, oh, blue's like the sky. Well, I never saw the sky. You can't. You don't have the kalim to be able to do it. So too here, I think when it comes to Hashem, we can't have the ability. We don't have the ability to describe him. So let's do a little more because he's really gonna go more into it and give more examples. Like we said, V'amar, it says, Ki gavna dabra nishmasa. And this is the same way that Hashem created the soul. That the essence of the soul reflects Hashem's perfection. Shaboni v'reis, that how it's created. Uf hachi mari alma. I'm just going to look in the English here because it's heavy on Aramaic. Ela kol shemahan lo kigavna disvarin uma ribon almin lesle shem yadia uf hachi lesle lenishmasa. He says, in the same way that Hashem can only be described in terms of his actions on the world, he created the soul in such a way that it can only be described in terms of its actions on the body, not in terms of its essence. So he's saying, just like we can't describe the essence of God, we can describe how God relates to the world, so too, we can't describe the essence of the soul, we can only describe how the soul interacts with the body. He's gonna give examples. But you have to look very well into this and be very precise. To understand the body and soul totally. And everything which is dependent on it. So if you're having trouble understanding it, don't worry, the Ramchal is saying you have to be very careful and very precise when you learn this thing. I assume a fire alarm would have been a bigger ping than just that little. Right. That was just probably, can you get the milk on the way home from shul? Okay. There is no fire. All right. According to Hashem's perfection, his midah perfection, you can't call him by any name. We don't understand God's perfection. We say God's perfect, but we don't understand what that really means. You can't call something by a name if you don't understand it. Because a name is something which describes the being. And something which you can't totally comprehend. So you can't ligdor. You can't define it. You can't limit it by that name. So since we don't understand God's perfection, we can't call him anything in his essence. V'amnam, let's just finish this paragraph. V'amnam. However, we do understand certain midos, certain attributes of Hashem. Kigon, harachmanos, mercy, hamamshala, rulership, koach, strength, mishpat, justice, achemla, pity, hakas, anger, atokif, power, kol all of these actions, all of these attributes that we understand about Hashem based on his actions. We see how God relates with the world, so we can say, oh, God is dealing with the world with mercy, with power, with strength. And these are the attributes that the prophets were able to understand. Because Hashem gave the prophets this understanding. And according to this understanding, that we understand of his glory, so we call him these names. Rachman, we call him merciful, Moshel, a ruler, Amitz, powerful, Shofet, a judge, a Kiyotz, and similarly, V'hina Yafal Pishu, he's Baruch Mishlei Muso, who built Ibal Gevu V'Shir Kol. Even though when we describe Hashem in his perfection, he has no boundaries and no limits. Aval Eila Hamida Sheratzah, but these attributes that he wanted in himself, Hine Ratza Bam B'Gevu V'Shir Sheratzah. He made, I shouldn't say made, he uses these attributes in a certain measurement, a certain level. Valkain, lemida achas nikra rachmanis. For one attribute is called merciful. Ula achas memshal, another ruler. Lemida achas koach, and another one strength. Lemida achas ava, and love. V'chein kulam, and all of them. V'im midas rachmanis ela rachmanis. And in his attribute of mercy, it's only mercifulness, mercy. V'lo memshala zulas memshala. And in power, it's nothing except for power. So when it comes to God's essence, his perfection, we can't describe him because we have no understanding, there's no limit. So we can't call him anything in his essence, in his perfection, because we don't understand it. There's no limit to it. But Hashem chose to deal with the world, for example, with mercy. He chose a certain amount of mercy that he's dealing with the world. So that we can call with a name. Let's just do one more. Let's see. So write 2 more paragraphs. I think it'll kind of be mashlim, everything. So give it like 5 more minutes. Is that right? It's just so v'gam ein brachmanos ela oso hashir. And when it comes to mercy, like we said, he only has that specific amount. Shu yizbarach rotzba that Hashem wants. V'lo b'memshala ela hashir. And when in rulership, only that specific amount she wrote, but that he wants. Now that doesn't mean that when it comes to Hashem's perfection, we're saying that he has these strengths and these attributes. All of these things are dependent on Hashem's will. Like we explained, because he could change it. He could change these attributes if he wanted to, and how he deals with the world and the amount. On the contrary, when it comes to Hashem's perfection, there's no shear, there's no measurement at all. But since Hashem wanted to deal with the world with these attributes, therefore we call him names. Hashem chose to deal with the world with certain attributes, so we call him names based on these attributes. Navin ba'amreinu shekodesh baruch hu rachman leimar shatzmusa yizbarach lefi atzmu kach. Now don't think that when we say Hashem is merciful, that we're saying his essence is mercy, that we're describing his essence. Like we say by a person, by a person you could say he has this aspect in his soul that he's a merciful person. We're describing the person, we're describing Rabbi Braun as a merciful person because in his soul he has this attribute of mercy. That it was placed, he has that inside of him. When it comes to Hashem, that we don't say. We can't even think about this. We have absolutely no understanding of what God is in his essence. But when we call him merciful, so why do we call God merciful? Navin understands he wanted a certain attribute. That is the attribute of mercy. But not describing himself. But according to the creations. And it has a certain measurement. And since Hashem chose that he's dealing with his creations with a certain level of mercy, we call him merciful, but we are not describing his essence. But his perfect and simple essence, it's separate from all of these things. And this is the faith that we require to believe. Like we already explained above. Okay, and now he's after, we'll continue next week, he's going to show how this concept applies even to our souls, and how certain aspects we can't really understand our soul. But the general idea is when we refer to Hashem, when we call him different names, we're not talking about his essence, because we don't have any comprehension of God's essence. We're only calling him, Hashem decided that he wants to deal with the world in mercy, in power, in rulership, with anger at times. So we give Hashem those names because that's how he chose to deal with us, his creations. But we are not describing his essence. The end.